The other thing I want to say is a bit of another advertisement. We are doing the pros and cons on the propositions on Sunday here at 3 o'clock. So we hope that these are the 7 propositions on the state ballot. So we hope that you will all come and bring your neighbors to hear it. Thank you. Mr. Church is going to go first and Ms. Gage will go second. And just like in the earlier forum, after the initial, then Ms. Gage will answer the first question and he'll switch. So everybody will be talking twice, answering the second answer and the first answer, the second answer and the first answer. All right, you've got 2 minutes.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out here this evening. I think these kind of events are really important, especially for local races, because this is what really affects everybody's day-to-day life, whether it's a supervisorial race or the sheriff's race. I'm a lifelong resident out here in North County. I've gone to school out here, went to Salinas High, but didn't have a North County High back in those days, Hartnell College, UCSC, and worked for myself since I was pretty much 18. I've been involved in a lot of community groups out here. I've actually been a member of all 3 of the Granges, first with the Springfield Grange, and then I joined the Prunedale Grange some years ago. And my wife, who's lived out here in Aromas for many years, got me into joining her in the Aromas Grange. But I've also was involved in on the board and a member of the Prunedale Chamber of Commerce when it existed. Currently a president of the Fire Safety Council for Monterey County. So I've been involved in a number of different issues. Politically, I first started to get involved in things about 40-some years ago. I got appointed to a committee at Royal Oaks Park. It was kind of a youth group that was looking into youth activities and facilities. And since then, I've been involved in a number of issues, from water to parks that I mentioned, fire prevention. I served on a couple of years ago, I served on the interim board of the Stans Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And I've been involved in not just being on these committees, but actually being involved in a lot of the basic reviewing of some of the ordinances. The first time I was ever involved in it was back in the 80s on the Oak Tree Protection Ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gage?
Can everyone hear me now? All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Regina Gage, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for inviting us, and of course, thank you to everyone here for spending your Thursday night with us. So obviously, I'm running for Monterey County Board of Supervisors. I live in Prunedale. I've lived there for over 20 years with my wonderful husband, Stuart. I'm originally from the Midwest. I come from a blue-collar, working-class background, so I understand the value of hard work. I took the early withdrawal plan from high school and dropped out of high school, and then went on and worked my way through college, graduating college with honors, and then eventually going to law school and graduating law school. So I share that with you because nothing was handed to me. I understand the value of hard work, and I'm proud of my blue-collar roots. I'm currently the executive director for Meals on Wheels of the Salinas Valley. I'm very proud of that. It's a multi-million-dollar agency. We basically transformed that agency in the past couple of years into a dynamic, thriving agency that serves hundreds of people every day. I also was elected in 2018 to the Salinas Valley Memorial Healthcare District Board, so I am their vice president. And again, I share this with you because I have a lot of leadership experience. I've been a chief financial officer of a nonprofit, taking care of troubled children. I've been a legal advocate for domestic violence victims, and I've had a wide range of leadership positions. The reason I'm running for county supervisor in District 2 is as long as we have lived in District 2, District 2 seems to be continuously ignored. And I don't quite understand. If you look at our roads, they're worse than ever. If you look at the garbage, worse than ever. There's dead animals left on the side of the road. So I'm running because I'm tired of living in a district that, as far as I know, we all pay the same taxes as our friends in Carmel Valley and Monterey that is consistently ignored. So I have the experience to advocate and fight to get more resources for District 2. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the first question, and Ms. Gage, you're going to go first.
Okay.
What are the biggest issues facing District 2? And you have, actually, looking at the questions, I'm going to go to 90 seconds for these questions because we don't have as many questions. So, 90
Okay,
seconds.
I'm sorry, the biggest issues facing District 2?
Yes.
Well, the first issue I think is we've heard from a lot of people, and I could say hundreds or thousands, but we've heard from a lot of people that they feel as though we do not get our fair share of resources, not more than our friends in District 5 or District 4. Can we just have our fair share? Obviously, homelessness is a huge issue, and it's a tragedy that we're all watching in the modern day. So I would say getting our fair share, homelessness, obviously water is a huge issue. They're all sort of on par with one another. Infrastructure is huge. As I said, water is a huge issue. Homelessness is a huge issue. So I think those are the issues that we have got to address as a community and as a county.
Mr. Church?
Sure. So there are just a multitude of issues out here, and one of them is county services. Look at our roads, look at the litter that's out here on the roads in many places like Elkhorn Road, Garn Road, you go over Trafton Road, there's just trash being dumped there. The roads aren't being maintained like they used to be. Part of that has to do with the county maintenance budget for roads has been dramatically cut over the last 50 years. But it's just not just roads. One thing I found when I went around and knocked on doors, and kind of surprised me, one of the most common complaints was that culverts aren't even being cleaned. And, you know, that's very, very basic. You know, people in Los Lomas and other places were telling me how the water would flow over and go into their garages. Another big issue out here, of course, is water. It's water quality. We're in a difficult situation because we're between the Pajaro Valley and the Salinas Valley, and there's got to be some joint collaboration there because water does not flow along political boundaries. It flows the way it wants to flow. The other big issue, and the issue I've been really making a focal point, is wildfire protection. We are at a real risk of becoming another Paradise, California. These eucalyptus groves are a great threat to us. We have county regulations that are in the way of people being able to take care of their own property, such as the oak tree ordinance, which has been morphed into something where it's basically requiring us to have to get a permit to cut up a dead oak tree. And these are just basic things that need to be common sense changed and work for people.
Thank you. Okay. Question number 2, Mr. Church, you'll be first. And again, we're going to stick with 90 seconds for the question. What can county government do to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels to meet climate change goals?
County can do a number of different things. For example, on housing, certain requirements that could be put forth into there that could become more amenable to reducing fossil fuels and electricity, or increasing the use of a lot of alternative energy such as solar requirements onto there. There can be some other things done in terms of the county buildings and making them more green in that way. We can look at the county fleet, for example, and it's a tremendous amount of cars and trucks that the county uses. These can be moved over at a quicker pace than the governor is proposing in 2035, is having us to be pretty much not selling any fossil fuel cars to that point, gasoline and diesel powered cars. So those are a few steps that we can do along the way right there. But we could also, we could also kind of just look around at collaboratively, I think, in this county, and finding ways to address this and discuss it more and what works at the public level, instead of just opposing what the board or the county wants to do and suggests down on people. It has to be workable solutions that work for people. And I would suggest that's going to be a collaborative effort that needs to be started onto there.
Well, I think the county needs to collaborate. It cannot it cannot be a dictate coming from on high. Obviously, fossil fuels is a huge issue. Climate change is a huge issue. I think it would behoove all of us to be able to get out of our cars more, but the reality is, at least the reality that I hear from people, is until public transportation is safe and convenient, people are simply not going to use it. I mean, I live in Prunedale. I work in Salinas. There's no way for me to take a public bus to my job. It would take me hours, and it's simply not safe. We don't have sidewalks, we don't have walkable areas. So I think the county has got to take a long view of this. It's not going to change overnight, but they're going to have to work with a variety of agencies to make it easier for people to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels.
Seth, leaking septic tanks contaminate our groundwater with nitrates. A few years ago, there was an effort by the Water Quality Board to reduce the amount of nitrates in the groundwater by regulating and requiring regular cleaning of septic tanks. Up here in North County, there was a big outcry that locals couldn't afford to maintain their septic tanks. How are we going to solve this problem to protect our groundwater?
We mostly all use wells.
You're first.
Obviously, in North County, water is a huge issue, and the fact that most of us are on well systems is another big problem. And the contamination, I think some people may be in a position to pay for that. They may not feel that they should be paying for that, considering we all pay the same amount of taxes as our friends in the rest of the county. And other people, I mean, trust me, I work at Meals on Wheels. People are living on $1,000 a month, so they don't have a lot of extra funds. So what I would say is to revisit that, and in my job, I have been very successful finding funding from a variety of sources, whether that's federal, whether that's state, whether that's county. Also, I think we're going to have to look at maybe some private collaborations to help us overcome that problem.
Thank you. Mr. Church?
Sure, I think the important thing to look at here is the wells, the septic tanks where there's going to be a problem. They're going to be these older tanks. It's going to be older homes. There have to be homes where you have elderly people on limited incomes, or you're going to have homes that where working people are. They're not going to have the money to deal with this. They're not going to have the resources to take care of these problems, because this isn't going to be an issue in somewhere like Oak Hills where they have a sewer system. This is going to be an issue in a new home where there's a new tank. It's going to be where there's older tanks. And so if we're going to address this, we can't just go through and just throw it out there and say everybody's got to meet a certain standard without helping these people have a means to be able to help themselves into this. So this is a problem. A lot of time we put out regulations in the county, we put them out, we don't look at how the impact it has on working people. So yes, I would agree, we need to look for grants onto there. The county administrative office has a person that writes the grants, looks for grants, seeks them from the state and the federal government, and that's where we should go and look for some into there. But we got to make sure that this is something that is not going to be done, that puts a burden on poor, lower economic people.
Okay, a follow-up question to that is up off Vega Road. There was the septic problem got so bad and the water contamination got so bad that those people were forced at $30,000 apiece to have gone to the Pajaro sewer system. How do we deal with that? Mr. Church, you're going to go first.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the same answer. This is a good case right there. You're not talking about, well, I don't know exactly which homes it was. There are some nice homes on Vega Road, but most of them are older homes. You're throwing $30,000 on the people who are either renters or homeowners, and and if they're renters, sure, it's a property owner that has to pay for it, but it's going to be increasing the rent. And this is got to where you come in with a county with a budget of $1.8 billion. If it's going to put those kind of restrictions out there, it's got to go through and help the people who do not have the means to deal with these problems.
Ms. Gage?
I think expecting someone to come up with $30,000 is unrealistic for the vast majority of people. And again, water is a huge issue in North County, and I think the county leaders have got to look at a regional approach, and as long as I've been here, it's been an issue. So expecting someone to spend $30,000 is just not realistic, as I said, for the majority of people. So whether the county has to expand their budget or reduce line items in other areas that are not as essential as clean, safe water, then something has got to be done. We've talked about this long enough. It's time for some real solutions to this issue.
Thank you. Next question, and Ms. Gage, you're going to go first.
Okay.
What would you do about multiple trailers parked and lived in on single-dwelling home lots in Monterey County, especially in Prunedale? Having multiple trailers, so there are multiple people living on a single-family lot, each one in its own trailer.
Right. Well, obviously housing is another huge issue in our county, and like the rest of California, we are woefully behind in the housing stock that we're supposed to create. And then, of course, you have the catch-22 of we don't have enough water, allegedly, to support the housing. I think you've got to go to the owner of this property and talk to the owner to find out, why do you have so many people living on this one property? Do these people have another place to stay? Because we sure as hell, excuse my French, do not need any more people living on our streets or along the railroad tracks. So I think you've got to go to the property owner, because that's the person who's most likely giving permission to these people, and find out if there's some other avenue for these folks to take.
Mr. Church?
Sure, obviously these people are living here because they don't have homes. They don't have a place to live. It is a problem out here. I know one in my neighborhood where this situation is developing. But we got to look at what the real problem is right here. You know, this is going through and chasing the people off of here without a solution is the same thing as going through and just chasing a homeless off of one place and have them go to another, because people have got to live somewhere. So that's where I've been highly critical of Monterey County's housing policies over the last 40 years. We've been encouraging the building of bigger homes. The average American home is 1,000 square feet bigger than it was 40, 50 years ago. And we need to build smaller homes, you know, whether it's going to be ADUs, whether it's going to be duplexes. We have some big homes now. A simple way to make 2 dwellings out of that is to make a 3,000 square foot home into a 1,500 square foot duplex. That's a quick way to go about doing some of this stuff. So we have to create more housing stock, and we have to create the housing stock so when we have big developments, builders can actually go through and build and not be facing these high costs, heavily regulated on building a smaller home. Nobody builds 800,000, 1,200 square foot homes here because it's not affordable, and it has to be made affordable because that is the way homes used to be made, as cheap rentals and as starter homes.
What can be done to improve road quality, including widening the shoulders and improving the road surface and road markings?
Well, there's nothing cheaper than paint. That's for sure. And look how the roads that we have around here, there's no paint on them. So, I think what can we do is we can start to go through and increase the road maintenance budget. It hasn't kept up with inflation over the last 50 years. This is something that needs to go forth and do. One of the reasons on that is that we have what is called the TOT tax, which is the Transit Occupancy Tax. This is a tax that's imposed on hotels when visitors come down here, and this tax generates, I can't remember the exact number, $25–30 million. The bulk of that used to go for road infrastructure. Now it's 25%. It needs to be a lot more. It needs to go back to that. We need to raise it back up so that the people who are using the roads that come down here are going to be paying for them to be fixed so that we can use them as well. And so that's where I would say a first step is to come up with some money, is to increase that fund back to the road maintenance is where it needs to go, and not have it going off to whatever fund it is right now, this $1.8 billion budget.
Thank you. Ms. Gage.
And again, this goes towards District 2 being ignored as long as we've been here for 2 decades. If you go visit other places in the county, you won't see that the surfaces and markings are in such sad shape. Maybe South County, I take that back. So again, there's funding out there, whether it's at the state level, the county level, or the federal level. It just takes someone who's willing to be persistent and not take no as an answer, so that we can get our fair share of these resources, so that our quality of roads will improve. Because again, as I said earlier, we all pay the same amount of taxes.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Ms. Gage. What is your position on desalination as a solution to providing adequate water supplies for current needs and future development?
Well, I think it has to be considered. It's not a perfect solution, but obviously California is in a serious drought. I read recently that I think part of President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure bill, there was like $10 million allocated basically over to the peninsula. And great for them. We need the peninsula. We need, their industry and their businesses. But over here in North County, we need a solution so that we have adequate, clean water. We cannot depend on Mother Nature to replenish our aquifers and our groundwater. So I think that while it's not perfect, I know there's been technology, slant wall technology, and there are environmental concerns about all the brine that has to be taken out, the marine life. Nobody wants any of those things to be compromised. But other parts of the world who are in serious desert situations, they can figure out desal. Now, I know there was a discussion whether it should be owned privately or publicly. I'm not sure that it couldn't be a hybrid of both. I do think at this point in time, water's been an issue for how many years in this county? 50 years, 60 years? At this point in time, it's going to have to be on the table, and we're going to have to seriously consider desal.
Mr. Church?
Is there any problem more complicated than water? And I've looked into this over the last months, talked to a whole range of people, from the Monterey Peninsula to the Salinas Valley to out here to the Oro Valley, and we're going to have to find a solution that works for everybody. Too often we're finding solutions that take care of one need here or one need there. We got to find a regional solution. The Board of Supervisors is moving in that direction. Supervisor Mary Adams is holding the forums of having all the stakeholders involved into this, being a part of finding some solution. And having, my going through and talking with people, I know desal is coming. It's a matter of when and how it's going to be devised. But we're going to get really one shot at this. And we do this one shot, it's got to be the right way. And it's got to be the right way so that it takes care of needs that we have, but also not create other problems. But before we get to desal, we also need to look at every single option that is out there. I've been advocating for a long time that we have a big body of water outside of Castroville, the Timbladero Slough. Brackish water, there could be several hundred acre feet pulled out of there a month, but it is not being used. It has been considered, but it's not being used. And before we get to desal, we need to use every single source that we have because those sources are generally cheaper. Desal is not cheap environmentally or in price.
Thank you. Mr. Church, do you support roundabouts in North County?
Roundabouts can be good and they can be bad. Go to some places in the country. I remember being back in Boston there a couple of years ago, and this one roundabout, I could not figure out how to get off it where my exit was. We do not want those kind of roundabouts. But you look at the roundabout over near Pebble Beach. That one has worked very well. So roundabouts, if they're designed right, they can be done so that people have horse trailers and other vehicles, and so that people have their trucks that are around in neighborhoods around out here can utilize them in a way. Yes, it can help. But let's not think roundabouts are going to solve all our problems because they're planned from Warner Road to Hull Road to San Miguel. Yes, it's going to be great for people on like Echo Valley, and I pity those people who have to try to get onto San Miguel at the wrong time. It's going to be great for places like that. But if the roundabouts start to ease the traffic congestion, then more traffic is going to come because people will find out that it's easier to go through San Miguel with the roundabout than going through Castroville. That's why the traffic situation got so bad here in the first place, because of the Salinas Road overpass. So it's all going to balance out. In general, I think there's, if they're done right, I'll support it.
Thank you. Ms. Gage?
Yes, I think there is a place for roundabouts, and they are a bit disconcerting because for me, they were so new. The first time I was on one was my husband and I were out of the country actually, and I thought, is this how we're going to spend our vacation, by being in this roundabout? But once you get used to it, they do make a certain level of sense. But again, it depends on the type of vehicle. If you have a semi-truck or a very heavy equipment type of vehicle, you're going to have to consider that. But I think, again, it's not going to be the panacea to take care of all of our traffic ills, but I think I believe on the East Coast they've been used for a long time and they can be very effective. I just know for me, when something is so new, my sort of initial reaction is, that's so new, how am I going to do it? I think we're going to all have to embrace this modernization of North County because the reality is we're not walling off North County. There are people here who live and work here. It's a beautiful area. We're not going to kick people out of North County. You can't force people not to come through North County. So I would support roundabouts if done thoughtfully and effectively.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Gage? We are tired of loud music played all night long, large party events with big tents. What can we do?
Obviously, this is a huge issue in North County, and we live in Prunedale. We hear it, where we're positioned, we don't hear it quite as often. But I think there are things we can do. One, I think we have to look at whether, are these the random celebrations that our neighbors are having? A quinceanera, or a birthday party, or an anniversary party? Or is this something that is a commercial venture that our neighbors are using as a way to supplement their income? I think there's two very different issues. The other thing is, when I ran a couple years ago, one of the most enlightening things I did was I went out twice with the deputy sheriffs. And I tell you, you don't know what it's like until you walk in someone else's skin. And this was on a Saturday night, in the evening, and I share this with you because there's a dynamic. You've got a lone sheriff often deputy sheriff, pulling up to these parties in the middle of the night, and basically that person is the one to tell you to shut it down. I'm here for you to stop your fun. So I think we have to be mindful of that. I also think that we, as property owners and renters and citizens, we have a right to peace and quiet. And these rights are not absolute. You have a right to enjoy your party in your backyard, but it shouldn't interfere with my rights. So I think we have to look at the two different scenarios. And then I also think if it's perpetual offenders, you go to the property owner and you start citing them. And I think one of the sheriff's candidates mentioned, you don't cite them $50 or $100, you cite them a substantial amount of money, because I think we all agree that people start paying attention when real money is involved. So I think there is something we can do about it.
Thank you. Mr. Church.
So this really isn't a new problem out here in North County. When the first zoning restrictions were coming out in the 1960s, one of those restrictions was you had to have a permit for a dance hall, because apparently the problem back then is that a lot of barns, or who knows, maybe even this Grange, where they're having probably country music, as I believe was the problem back then, dances going late into the night, and music spilling out and disrupting the neighborhoods. There was something done in enforcement onto that. There's been problems that, back in the 70s and in the 80s, where I live on Hidden Valley Road, we had a problem with a rock band over there. So this is a problem that's been going on and on and on. And it's really about being good neighbors. If I was to address this issue, the first thing I would want to do is sit down with whoever's going to be the next sheriff, because it's going to take collaboration with the sheriff to do that. And it's also going to take collaboration with the sheriff and also real good code enforcement onto here. Because what we're looking at with a lot of these parties is massive violations, not just on noise, but on sanitation, on parking, on alcohol, food being sold at these places. And so you could roll up a whole lot of code enforcement fines onto these people, thousands of dollars onto these people. And that is exactly what needs to be done. You do hit that with a couple property owners, and it becomes more expensive than to hold that party, and they will stop having that party. That's what I argued when this first sound ordinance came out, is that the fines were too low at $1,000.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Church. How will North County increase affordable housing without adequate, reliable water?
What North County is going to have to do is find the right places for it. And of course, this all goes back to the whole water issue with desal. That's what we're going to need, or utilizing places where we can get water, like the Templadero Slough. And we're going to have to do something everywhere around into this whole area of North County on how we will go about approaching this, because the state is going to be mandating the stuff coming down here that we have enough housing. And they're already leaning on a lot of municipalities that don't want to go through and make the zoning changes that are necessary. But in my view, if you're going to have a proper housing around, we need to look at areas where there's already going to be some built-up infrastructure. Pajaro, Castroville, Salinas in particular, into those areas. And no, not just to make them like they have been done, where you've had low-income housing thrown into like Castroville, but making things so you have some small single-family homes, affordable homes into there. But this, also out here, we're going to have to start looking at some ADUs that are going to have to be coming in wherever they're properly allowed. And we're also going to have to, take some innovative approaches, such as I suggested earlier, where we have a large dwelling. It has multiple bathrooms onto it. Probably only has one kitchen. Turn it into a duplex. You got to add a kitchen. You already got two dwellings right there in that place. At that point, and there's already been water adequately enough for those bathrooms. It should be enough water adequate now to make it to two homes.
Thank you. Ms. Gage.
Okay, considering that we will have our water solution solved, obviously the state is mandating that we have to try to catch up with this housing situation. I think the county needs to get out of its own way. I've talked to many people who want to build ADUs, but the permitting process is so cumbersome, so expensive, that the average person can't do it. People have multiple parcels, yet they can't build houses on their own property. So the county has got to get out of its way. So we're going to have to consider ADUs, granny units, converting garages into livable spaces. I also think that the term affordable housing, I've heard it for many years. To me, it sounds like a lot of political rhetoric in one way, because who are we talking about? Are we talking about just this generic affordable housing? Or are we talking about housing that is affordable for the people who live and work in this community? And this is a highly agricultural community, excuse me, hospitality, and those jobs are not known for their high-paying salaries. So I think we've got to be realistic. What are we talking about when we say affordable housing? The average home in Monterey County is $900,000. And that's great for many of us who own homes. For the average person, that's just out of reach. That's untenable. So again, the county has to get out of its own way and relax the permitting process. Also turn some of these commercial areas. You've got Kmart down in Salinas, this huge empty structure, and I believe there is legislation coming out of Sacramento that's going to make it more possible, but the county and the state has got to get out of its own way. And more people are going to be leaving California, and small businesses are not going to be very happy about that.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Gage. Do you support Measure Q, the Safe Quality Child Care Act? Why or not? Why not?
I believe that is the one that's going to add $50 to everyone's annual tax.
$49.
Excuse me?
$49.
$49, excuse me, I stand corrected by $1. I support the fact that we need childcare for people who work and live in this community, because I think that was blown apart during the pandemic, and it primarily fell on women. And obviously I like men, I'm married to one, but it fell on women who had to basically leave their jobs to take care of their children, and also because the schools were, not in set, well, they were Zooming, these kids were at home. So I think that we do need to make childcare affordable. I am a little concerned whether the county, and again, I work in the nonprofit world, I worked in entrepreneurial world, can be that efficient to make it happen. I mean, I think it's a grand idea in theory. I would really like to see more specificity. How is the county going to make that happen? Or are child care providers just going to raise their rates even more, which is going to basically make it a moot point? So yes, I support the idea in theory. I'd like to see more details on how the county is going to make it efficient and make it available and accessible to everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Church.
Having read this proposal, I also have a lot of concerns with it. The Board of Supervisors are going to have a great deal of power over how this is developed, and they can go and really morph it into a whole lot of different things. But my biggest concerns onto this is that the $49 fee is not really fair out there. I'm reluctantly supporting it, but the $49 fee is not really fair because it's exempting agriculture. It's also going through, and if somebody has an apartment building, there's one single $49 fee. There's not the proper exemptions for low-income elderly people onto this. These things are all need to be addressed. The Board of Supervisors can address. I'm also really concerned that this is, as the way it's written, gives the power for the county to build facilities and buy facilities. I'm concerned about how that will impact a lot of small daycare centers that are out in our neighborhoods. When I went out and knocked on the doors and through this whole county, I've come across a great deal of people who are having daycare centers in their neighborhoods. I think that's important because then their neighbor can just drop the child off with somebody they know, and it's convenient, and not going to some large facility somewhere. I'm also very concerned about the advisory committee onto this. There's a 50-member advisory committee. I don't think that advisory committee is truly representing the people that it should.
Thank you. Mr. Church. Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, and other large California counties have banned fireworks altogether. What's your position on a fireworks ban for Monterey County?
Fireworks are a lot easier to ban in San Francisco, that's for sure, than they are here in a county of this size in Monterey County. it's, people are gonna fire off fireworks and balloon or Big Sur, and we're not gonna have the resources to really impact on that unless we're going to be hiring up hundreds or more sheriff deputies and putting them out on patrol. I don't have a problem with that kind of banning, actually, but I think the key is going to be enforcement. And I think the real key how you go about enforcing that is this starts to ramp up for July 4th fireworks. It takes several weeks to ramp up. And the best way to go about that, and again, this is going to be an issue of sitting down with the sheriff's department, because they're going to have to do a lot of this enforcement and code enforcement again. It's much like the sound ordinance issue. But what we need to do is that when the first ones start to go off, you need to clamp down and hit those people hard, so that the word gets out there that you're going to shoot off these fireworks and threaten not just our pets, but threaten fires, then you're going to pay a fine, and a stiff fine for that. So it's going to take a real good plan to go about doing this. And if we can, if we can put together the enforcement policy for that, I'm all for it.
Thank you, Ms. Gage.
I think in this county, specifically in this community, with all of our eucalyptus trees and the severe fire concern, I think there should be a ban. But again, bans are meaningless unless they can be enforced. I was once a domestic violence advocate, and you can get all the restraining orders in the world. It's a piece of paper at the end of the day. So I think that there's got to be some meat behind these bans. I also think that many of us love fireworks. It's sort of an American tradition. It celebrates our independence. So maybe what we do is try to make more professional events available to people, so it's easier to gather and go see someone who knows what they're doing, light off these fireworks, rather than gathering in your house and doing it. It terrifies the animals. We have animals, so I do support a ban. Maybe education. I mean, maybe starting in the schools earlier to educate kids who, many of them have pets and love their animals, how it terrifies animals. You always read on Facebook North and Broomdale North, animals flying off into the night because they're terrified. It's also a serious fire hazard. So I would support a ban, but again, a ban is meaningless unless you have something to support enforcement of that ban.
Ms. Gage, the various homeless encampments are periodically cleaned out, and then they reoccur. They pop up again somewhere else. What do you plan to do to stop the whack-a-mole problem? The problem of moving the homeless but not dealing with the homeless?
I think this is a modern-day tragedy, and we are all observing and watching. And I've done a lot of thinking about this. I have spent most of my professional life taking care of people who are underserved, disadvantaged, whether it's women who suffer domestic violence, foster children, group home children, and now homebound seniors. California is on track to spend $12 billion on this problem, and it's not getting any better. So I think we all have to take a really good, hard look at what we're doing. Nobody wants anybody to live in the streets. This is not being humane to let somebody, and many of these people have serious alcohol and drug problems and mental health crisis. It is not humane to allow these people to basically live in their own waste, flailing and crying out. I mean, I see them every day. So I think we're going to have to reconsider what we're doing, because it's not working. The $12 billion, I think we have got to meet with the new sheriff, whoever that may be, and we need to talk about more enforcement and more intervention, that people need serious drug and alcohol. I think they all need shelter, but if you have a raging fentanyl problem, giving you a new apartment or a new house is not going to help you with that problem. Now you just have a raging fentanyl drug problem in your brand new house or apartment. So I think this is seriously a modern day tragedy. And I think all of us, if we all had an honest conversation, we could say, yes, we know somebody who's either had drug, alcohol, or mental health problems, but what we're doing is not working.
Okay, Mr. Church.
There are a lot of causes for homelessness. And to go through, I think your description here, Mary Ellen, of a whack-a-mole problem is exactly the case. I mean, to go through and chase homeless, collect their belongings, from one area, and then they're just going to go somewhere else. We've got to find a solution to where we're building some scalable processes here. And I want to use an example is let's find some cheap, inexpensive ways so that the people who want to be helped can have a place to go and try to get the leg up. Use an example of what was done in Santa Rosa a couple of years ago, and it was a short-term program. But they took a lot, fenced it, had security guards there, some porta potties. They provided tents, invited some homeless in there. They had to go obey by rules. They had to keep it clean. Mental health, medical care was provided to them, and jobs were provided where they were paid with vouchers. It was a success. It worked with the neighborhood. The only problem was they ran out of funding. These are the kind of things you need to do. You get that kind of set up. You invite these people in. Try to get these people in that really want to help themselves that can go up. And that's so they have a place to go. And we just got, we've got to stop this chasing them around the different places in the county. So that would be the first step I would want to go, and then we can go on to better and more permanent housing past that.
What would you do to mitigate the risks of wildfires in North County and prepare us for the likelihood?
I don't think you can ever be prepared for the potential wildfire of Paradise, California, and that's exactly what we're under threat here on. So we've got to deal with prevention. Fire is a big issue for me. I'm president of Fire Safety Council in Monterey County, as I mentioned earlier. This is an issue I grabbed on early on. I've laid out a 4-point plan, which I think we need to go through and take action on. And that includes, 1, putting together a county plan. We do not have a county plan for fire prevention. Other Sierra counties do. The one that I would like to model this after is one for the forest management, Lake Tahoe Forest Management Basin Plan, which basically allows, brings in coordination in the many emergency services and develops prescribed burns, access roads, a whole list of different things. But we also have to go through, remove these eucalyptus trees. There's millions of dollars available at the state and federal level for getting rid of these eucalyptus because they're a fire hazard. We need to improve our county regulations. As I pointed out earlier, having to get a permit to remove a dead oak tree is just frankly ridiculous, and that has to change. That will be a primary thing I'll be focusing on. And I also think that we also need to set forth a countywide chipping program. Other counties have it, including Santa Cruz County, where people who cut out defensible space and have their brush and have it chipped by the county.
Thank you. Ms. Gage?
Yes, obviously, again, fire is a huge issue, whether it's related to the homelessness encampments causing fires, or the illegal fireworks causing fires, or just wildfires. And if you look out, it's beautiful eucalyptus trees, but they are not indigenous, and they're a serious threat. However, my understanding is the average eucalyptus tree costs about $2,000 to remove. And some people in our neighborhood have literally hundreds of eucalyptus trees. So it's not realistic to expect someone to do that. I think what we all can do is realize that, again, we do need a county plan, and it needs to be a priority, and it needs to have the stakeholders, the people who actually can make this plan solid and effective. We all can take it upon ourselves to make sure we create defensible space. And again, that's probably doable for most of us. I work with homebound seniors. Some of these people can barely get to the door to get their food. So we're going to have to figure out a way to help people make defensible spaces on their property so that if there is a wildfire, there'll be some protection. Also, retrofitting your home. Again, it costs money, it costs resources. I do think ultimately, though, the county has got to maybe stop presenting so many resolutions at the Board of Supervisors meetings and take that time to create a plan for the serious potential that could happen. I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when coming to North County.
Okay, we have one more question here. So would you, before the sum up, tell us what you know about Aromas, where this forum is being.
You guys have a great Grange, and I'm very jealous. I love Ferndale, but we need you Grange. What I know about Aromas is it's a tri-county community, which is really interesting. And again, I reference Meals on Wheels because we sometimes have people who will call and they're in the Santa Cruz side or the San Benito, and we don't service them because of our funding. But I know that Aromas is it seems like a very connected community, and I would imagine as we talk to people when we're canvassing, people in Aromas also feel neglected, that they're not getting the services that they need, just like the rest of District 2.
I've lived out here in North County all my life, and I've known Aromas for all my life, from the joy of coming out here to work. What I think is the best single event in North County which is Aromas Day. You know, by far and away, it's just a great event. This community has a cohesiveness and just an organization all about it that I think a lot is really missing in a lot of other places. You might see it in some place like up in Carmel Valley, up in Carmel Village, or somewhere like that. But this is a very special place. It's and what really makes that really unusual being a special place is that it is 3 counties all butting up here, and there's a fire district, there's the water district, it all spills over here, and it all seems to work together. So that's just what makes the Aromas very special.
So this is sum up time. You are going to get your 90 seconds, but Ms. Gage is going to go first because Mr. Church, you went first to start.
All right, thank you. And again, thank you for your time. I realize it's getting late. So I believe that my unique combination of leadership experience makes me eminently qualified to be your next supervisor. I've now managed complex budgets. I know how to find resources. I know how to advocate. I've advocated for the nurses. I've advocated for my employees. I've been in leadership positions for most of my life. And while we may not always agree, you can be sure that we will have a forthright, direct conversation. I made this commitment when I ran before, that I would have regular meetings with the people who live in this community to hear your concerns. And while I may not have the solutions for you, I will let you know where we are. I'm running on my track record of success, and I think the best predictor of future success is what you've been able to accomplish in the past. I'm actually going to an award ceremony tomorrow because Meals on Wheels, and again, I have the pleasure of being their executive director, but I get to lead a wonderful team. We're being recognized again for our work during the pandemic. I've had the endorsement of the California nurses, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the people who do the work in this county, because they know that I will advocate for them. I do what I say I'm going to do. So I ask for your vote on November 8th so we can start making some changes in District 2. So thank you, and thank you again to the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Mr. Church.
This race is really important, not just for North County, but for all of Monterey County. It's really the swing vote of the Board of Supervisors. And that carries not just a responsibility for here, but also finding right solutions throughout this county. I believe in consensus and in working with all people. And you can look at my base of support, where it's coming from. I have people that are backing me from the right and from the left. And this is because people have known me for a long time. They know that I want to sit down and really solve problems. I run a campaign that I've really tried to draw upon support from the people. I have been offered up to $20,000 in political action committee money, and I turned it down because I want individuals to be supporting my campaign. I've had almost 500 contributions since the primary. Half of those have been small contributors from here. And what we have to do is to really kind of work together. And as I said, I have this broad base of support. I've been endorsed by the last 4 supervisors that are out here in this area. I've been endorsed from people as diverse as Bill Monty and Sam Barr, to Steve Snodgrass and the Farm Bureau. I want to work with people. I want to find solutions, and that's what we need to do.
Thank you very much. Now, I want to first thank the Grange for hosting this and providing the refreshments and doing it. And I want to thank my team here with the League for doing all of the calls and setting the meeting. Jeannie set up the meeting, Jean set up the meetings, to Dennis and Carolyn, and Catherine for sorting questions. And now let's give a round of applause